Alright, so you've just read the textbook about what proportions are, and we know that their proportion is set up as fractions that are equal to each other. Now we can't just put anything in the fraction, and it turns out that there are lots of different ways to do them correctly as well as lots of ways to do them incorrectly. So what I'd like to do is give you a couple of hints on how to not only do them correctly, but how to make the work a little bit easier for yourself as you're doing it. So here's a problem. Last weekend Cody and Clyde hiked for 5 miles. The hike took 3.5 hours. They are planning a similar hike this week, but the distance is 6.2 miles. About how long should they plan for their hike? So since this is a proportion problem, we know that since they're going more miles this week, it's going to be taking them more time than it did last week. So in the first week they did 5 miles in 3.5 hours. Those two sort of go together. Then we have 6.2 miles, and we don't know how long their hike is. So we need a variable, and I like to use the variable x. So I'm going to let x stand for how long it should take. I'm going to kind of shorten my work here because this is difficult to write on. So I have these two fractions. How should I set it up? Well, it turns out that it's a lot easier if you start with the x. So in my first fraction, I'm going to put x in the numerator. And since this x goes with this many miles, I'm going to put the 6.2 in the bottom. So my plan now is to put how many hours in the numerator and how many miles in the denominator. I put this over to the side just so that I don't forget when I make my second fraction. Now these two clearly go together. So now I want these two to go together too. Now I don't want to put the 5 in the top because the top represents hours. So on the other side, I'm going to put 3.5 on the top, and 5 on the bottom. One of the things you'll notice is that the hours and the miles, the units are over here. When we're writing equations, putting units in like we work with in unit fractions actually gets in the way. We want the only letter to be the variable we're solving for. So there we go. This is how we start it up or have it set up. So that's the first big step. The only thing we need to do now is to solve the equation. So I have x divided by 6.2 and I want to solve this equation. Now again, there's lots of ways to solve proportion equations, and I'm going to pick the easiest way, and that is, since it's x divided by 6.2, to undo this I'm going to multiply by 6.2 on both sides. I apologize, I have a new software and that funky color scheme keeps coming up. Now remember, if you multiply by 6.2 on this side of the equation, we're going to have to multiply by 6.2 on the other side of the equation to keep it balanced. So that gives me just x on this side. And on this side I have an arithmetic problem that I can do over here on my calculator. And that should give me my answer, 4.34. Now 4.34 what? Well, if you remember, x stood for hours. So this is how long this hike should be. Now one of the things you should stop and do is decide whether or not that's reasonable. A 5-mile hike took them 3.5 hours. This is a longer hike, but just a little bit longer. And now we're saying it'll take them 4.34 hours, which is longer than 3.5. So yes, this is reasonable. By the way, I don't check proportions by putting the x back into the original and see if it works. Because if we had it set up incorrect, and the x worked, we still would have an incorrect answer. So it's better to just decide, did the 4.34 make sense? If your answer is yes, then you've solved it correctly. All right, let's go on to another one. So here's a recipe example. Our favorite recipe calls for 4.5 cups of rice and serves 4 people. How many cups of rice are needed if we are planning a dinner for 14 people? So what do we have? We have some cups up here and some people. We want to know how many cups. Okay, there's our variable x. And we're going to feed 14 people. So remember, always start with your x. That makes it easier to solve the equation. And the x stands for cups. We want the x to go with these 14 people. So the other equation, or the other fraction on the other side, needs to be cups over people. So I've got 4.5 cups. Since I'm using a calculator, I'm going to write that as 4.5. And over 4 people. All right, so now this is all set up. And I need to solve this equation. This is x divided by 14, so to solve that equation, I can multiply it by 14. And if I do that to one side of the equation, I should do it to the other side. On this side, the 14s will cancel, and I'm left with just x. And on the other side, I have some arithmetic I need to do. So that's 15.75. Since this is something I'm going to be doing in my kitchen, I would probably think of that as 15 3/4, and the x stood for cups. Now, is that reasonable? 4.5 cups are used for 4 people, so there's a little bit more cups of rice than people. This says that we'd need 15 3/4 cups for 14 people. A little bit more cups of rice than the number of people that we have. So again, I'm pretty happy that this answer makes sense. All right, we're going to go on and have you work a couple more examples like this and then get a chance to check your answers.